So, hello fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 6455463728. And in this video, I figured I would talk about moving to the head of the line when it comes to death. So, what do I mean by that? Well, when you're a young person, you really never think that much about death, especially if you're in a reasonably developed country and you're not really surrounded too much by death. None of your relatives have died in a long time. It's not something that you think about. And, well, of course I have to talk about myself in that respect. It's just not something that you think about regularly, and quite honestly, you probably don't even really think that you might die. It just isn't. You think you're invincible. You think that everybody else is wrong, and, other people have died, but I don't know how far back you can think, but that was what my thought process was, really. That, just being honest, but at one point that really was my thought process. That, yes, objectively, supposedly you know that everybody dies, but you don't really quite believe it. And even as other people in my life died, for example, like grandparents and so on, it just never really was real that could happen to me. And especially as I never really got injured per se. I never broke an arm or a leg, or I was never in that situation where I thought it was in my face. But as you age, of course, like if I fast forward to today, I would have known people who were close in age to me that would have died. Not to mention all the different grandparents and other relatives who would have died. And then it becomes something that's more real. I broke my ankle, for example, and I thought maybe I might have gone my whole life without breaking a bone. And as these things happen, my mortality became more concrete and more real, and something that I had to face. But to an extent, I still have that 1% of me that's not believing necessarily that I might die. Maybe that happens to all of us until we're faced with that inevitable moment and we see maybe that happens to all of us, and even up to that inevitable moment where we see the truck heading towards us, or we see ourselves going off of that cliff, maybe it still doesn't sink in until then. I don't know. But the metaphor I would use is like if you're in the bank and you're waiting to see the teller, and at the beginning it feels like you might never ever reach to the head of the line, and then as you get to the end of the head of the line, maybe you have to wait for someone to come to do something else with you at the time, and you tell other people, well, yeah, you go on ahead, I'm waiting for someone. There's nothing like that analogous to that when it comes to death, right? You can't very well tell other people, well, no, you go on ahead, I'm okay for now, I'm waiting for someone else. That's impossible, and even if it was possible, it probably isn't nice. So, yeah, I don't know, in the final edit of this thing, those noises that you hear are my uncle, actually. I think I might need to do another video about him, about the reality of the situation, because I may have made it seem like everything is all hunky-dory with respect Yeah, I may have made it seem like everything was perfect with respect to my uncle and there are no problems and there's no issues because I've gotten used to dealing with most of the things that can happen. But obviously, at the beginning, when I was getting used to things, it was pretty horrible. Now things are a lot better, and it's part of a mentality, I suppose, that I had to cultivate, which is that you have to make things sustainable. You have to adopt a mentality that is sustainable. So I think that's part of it as well. But, when it comes even to speaking about my uncle, I suppose that's one of the things that, again, is not as easy as I might make it seem. Because, for example, one of these days I'm going to wake up and he's going to be dead, So hopefully it happens to him before me. And the reason why I say that is because if something happens to me, then the reason why I take care of him is because other people can't. So it's not going to go well for him after I'm gone, which is why I took it upon myself to do this completely. So hopefully it happens naturally for him. Hopefully it happens naturally for him while I'm still alive, and he can have a reasonably good life. For example, it's something again I might have mentioned in another video, that one of the things that I wanted to be prepared for, well, it's not one of the things. One of the things that I managed to prepare for was a time when he would not open his mouth to eat. And I was prepared for that because I listened to what I was prepared for that because I asked other people questions about what happened with their family. At least one neighbor. I think, that was it, I guess. And even in an article that I read, and it's just so sad for people who had means of, this lady who had means of, and I guess this video is becoming about my uncle, but the neighbors had said that it seemed like her father-in-law didn't want to eat anymore. And when I read an article, it seemed like one lady had her mother in her home, and that's what happened to her mother. They put the food in front of her and she wouldn't eat. So this was something that I was expecting, and it ultimately happened. And I don't know, for me, I'm gonna color it in a favorable light, that since I was aware that this was something that could happen, I was trying to take steps to deal with it. So in the case of my uncle, I realized that, okay, he likes to drink stuff. So milk, ordinary mixed milk, like powdered milk, I could mix that, make sure I had enough calories to give him, and he would drink it. But with the milk, it meant there was a lot of liquid in his system that, of course, he had to excrete, and that came with its own challenges of what would happen on the other end. And that was a big challenge, especially seeing as I didn't have bed liners. I didn't know about bed liners that I could put underneath him. I was trying to put newspaper that would absorb some of the stuff, the urine that came out, and it was uncomfortable, and he would try to pull it out from underneath him, and that was another problem. Anyway, now we have bed liners, so life's a little bit easier. It's more comfortable for him. He doesn't try to pull it out from underneath him and stuff. But I guess it's hard to deal with the fact that I am mortal. in one part of it. On another side, though, it's great to be mortal. I remember when I stopped believing in heaven, and for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, I can see why some people, if they ever come to that bridge, never cross, because it was a fact in my mind that there was no afterlife. There was nothing that I could do about it, but in accepting it, I had to accept that one day I would not exist completely, entirely, and forever. But after I did come to that acceptance, I felt a certain amount of relief, I suppose. A relief that maybe from the potential boredom or whatever might come from being immortal. So even though there is a certain amount of fear on my end, and I suppose on everyone's end, of this moment when you'll pass into nothingness, it still is, there is a part of me that is relieved that I won't have to deal with whatever else comes from being never ending. To be honest, heaven doesn't really seem that great a place to be. Heaven doesn't really seem that great a place to be, because let's say, for example, it's an infinite amount of time just praying and worshiping the Creator. As let's say some parts of Christianity might say, that sounds incredibly boring. It's incredibly boring to worship the Creator on earth. It sounds even incredibly boring to know that I would be stuck doing this incredibly boring thing forever without any hope of stopping. And of course, if I'm going to hell, that doesn't really seem to be much better. Obviously, I'm joking. So it doesn't seem, there's two ends that seem really horrible. And then there's the other end that even if, let's say, for example, I as an immortal with a soul, even if I were to come to the realization of knowing everything and knowing everything about God and whatever else, that really seems, being immortal and knowing everything and not having any more to find out does not sound like fun at all. So yeah, in many ways it is something of a relief. And ultimately there is nothing to be afraid of when it comes to dying, because we die every day. That's why there's so many metaphors that have to do with death with respect to sleeping and everything else. Every morning we reboot and we remember and we pick up all the capabilities and cognition of what's going on in our life, where we are now. But we were dead for many intents and purposes. So, but anyway, guys, wish me lucks. I don't know if I'll keep saying that. However, like or unlike, comment, subscribe, and or share. Thanks. Peace.